Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The fluorescent lights of the Starlight Hotel lobby cast a cold glow on the polished floors as Debbie adjusted her uniform, balancing a tray of cleaning supplies in one hand. It was another long evening shift, and her mind flitted between class notes on programming algorithms and the mounting bills at home. The hum of the elevator broke her thoughts, and as the doors slid open, out stepped William Gardner. He moved with an air of quiet confidence, his tailored suit fitting him as though it had been designed by the gods themselves. Debbie barely noticed him until she heard his voice. "Excuse me," William said, his tone polite yet firm. "Do you know where I can find the manager?" Debbie hesitated, looking up at the man who towered over her. The manager. "He should be in his office, second door to the left." William's piercing blue eyes met hers, and for a moment, she felt as if he was sizing her up, searching for something beyond her words. "Thank you," he said, offering a faint smile before walking away. But as he turned, a folder slipped from under his arm, scattering papers across the floor. "Oh wait, you dropped something," Debbie exclaimed, quickly setting down her tray to gather the loose sheets. William crouched down beside her, their hands brushing briefly as they both reached for the same page. "Thank you," he said again, this time with a more genuine smile. "It's a business proposal I can't afford to lose." "No problem," Debbie replied, stacking the papers neatly before handing them back. "Looks important." "It is," William admitted. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "I'm William, by the way." "Debbie," she replied, standing and brushing off her uniform. "I work here as a cleaner and a student at Technologies," she added quickly, as if to justify herself. "Impressive," William said, surprising her. "I respect anyone who works hard to achieve their goals. Maybe I'll see you around." And with that, he walked away, leaving Debbie standing there with a strange fluttering in her chest. She shook her head, reminding herself that people like William Gardner didn't notice people like her. But as she returned to her duties, she couldn't shake the feeling that their brief interaction had been more than a coincidence. The coffee shop buzzed with life as Debbie sat by the window, her laptop open to lines of code that refused to make sense. The scent of roasted beans mingled with the sound of soft jazz, but her focus was on the looming deadline for her programming assignment. She sighed, pushing a strand of hair from her face, when a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Debbie?" She looked up to see William standing there, a paper cup in one hand and an expression of surprise on his face. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, he seemed more approachable than the suited figure she'd met at the hotel. "William," she said, blinking. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," he replied with a grin. "Do you live around here?" "Kind of," Debbie admitted, gesturing to the laptop. "Trying to finish an assignment. You?" "I had a meeting nearby," William said, pulling out the chair across from her. "Mind if I join you?" Debbie hesitated. "Sure," she said finally, saving her work and closing the laptop. "How was your meeting?" "Productive," he replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "But it's nothing compared to what you're doing. At Technologies, right?" "Yeah," Debbie said, her tone cautious. "It's a lot of work, but I'm managing." William leaned forward, his expression curious. "You know, I've always admired people who can balance so much. Work, school, it's impressive." She gave a small laugh, glancing at her hands. "Well, it's not glamorous. Cleaning rooms isn't exactly what most people would call a dream job. But it's honest work," William said firmly, "and it says a lot about your character." Debbie looked at him, unsure how to respond. There was no trace of condescension in his voice, only genuine admiration. For a moment, she felt the gap between their worlds shrink, but reality quickly reasserted itself. William was a top manager, and she was just trying to make ends meet. "Well," she said, breaking the silence, "I should get back to this." "Of course," William said, standing, "but let me leave you with this. If you ever need help, or even just someone to talk to, I'm around." She watched as he walked away, his words lingering in her mind. For someone from a world so different from hers, William had a way of making her feel seen. But could she ever truly belong in his world? Debbie and William's relationship began with cautious steps. At first, Debbie was hesitant to accept his attention, wary of their differences. Yet, William's persistence and kindness broke down her walls. He took her to cozy diners, art galleries, and long walks in the park, showing her a world she hadn't yet experienced. One evening after a picnic by the lake, Debbie found herself laughing at one of William's stories. "You're impossible," she said, shaking her head. "I prefer determined," William replied, grinning, "and I'm determined to make you see how amazing you are." Their connection deepened with each passing day. Late-night phone calls turned into weekends spent exploring the city together. Debbie shared her dreams of working in it, and William encouraged her with unwavering belief in her abilities. Months later, during a surprise weekend getaway, William led Debbie to a secluded beach at sunset. The sound of the waves and the golden hues of the horizon set the perfect scene. As Debbie marveled at the beauty around her, William dropped to one knee, a small velvet box in his hand. "Debbie, you've brought so much joy into my life. Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice filled with emotion. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, William. 1,000 times yes." They embraced as the tide washed over their feet, sealing their promise to each other. From that moment on, their bond grew stronger, preparing them to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Gardner estate loomed ahead, a sprawling mansion with manicured lawns and wrought iron gates. Debbie smoothed her dress nervously as she stood beside William, who gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "They'll love you," he said softly, though his expression betrayed a hint of doubt. The butler opened the door, ushering them into a grand foyer adorned with crystal chandeliers and oil paintings. Moments later, Robert and Eleanor Gardner appeared, their presence as imposing as their home. Robert, a silver-haired man with a stern expression, steadied Debbie briefly, while Eleanor's polite smile barely masked her disdain. "So this is Debbie," Eleanor said, her tone measured. "William has told us quite a bit." "Nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Gardner," Debbie said, extending her hand. Eleanor ignored it, choosing instead to take a sip from her crystal glass. "What do you do, Debbie?" Robert asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm a student," Debbie replied, keeping her tone steady. "Studying at technologies and working part-time as a room cleaner." "A cleaner?" Eleanor's eyebrows arched. "How industrious." William's jaw tightened. Debbie works hard to support herself while pursuing her degree. Not everyone has the luxury of. "William," Robert interrupted, raising a hand. "Let's not turn this into a debate. We only want what's best for you. And Debbie is what's best for me," William said firmly, his voice echoing through the room. An awkward silence followed, broken only by the faint clink of Eleanor's glass. Debbie felt the weight of their judgment but refused to wilt under their scrutiny. "We appreciate your concern," she said, meeting Robert's gaze directly. "But William and I are building a life together based on mutual respect and love." Eleanor let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. "Love? That's quaint, but let me be clear. If you marry her, William, you'll have no support from this family, financially or otherwise." "Then so be it," William said, standing and taking Debbie's hand. "I don't need your money, I need her." Debbie's heart pounded as they left the mansion, the weight of their rejection pressing on her. Outside, William turned to her, his face resolute. "I'm sorry," he said, voice heavy with emotion. "I didn't expect them to." "It's okay," Debbie interrupted, squeezing his hand. "We'll figure it out, together." The weeks following the confrontation with the Gardners were grueling. William had moved into Debbie's modest apartment, a far cry from the luxury he'd grown up with. Stacks of textbooks and sticky notes covered the small dining table, and the hum of Debbie's laptop filled the room late into the night. "You should rest," William said one evening, setting down 2 mugs of coffee. Debbie glanced up, dark circles under her eyes. "I can't," she replied, flipping through her coding notes. "The final project is due in 2 days, and if I mess this up..." "You won't," William interrupted, his tone firm. "You're brilliant, but you need to take care of yourself too." Debbie managed a small smile but returned to her work. Balancing her studies while picking up shifts as a cleaner had become a delicate juggling act, especially with the Gardners' influence casting a long shadow. One afternoon, Debbie's boss called her into the office at the hotel. His expression was apologetic. "Debbie, I've got to let you go," he said, avoiding her gaze. "The Gardners have threatened to pull their business unless you're fired. I can't afford to lose them." Debbie's throat tightened, but she nodded. "I understand," she said quietly, holding back tears. That evening, she broke the news to William. "They got me fired," she said, her voice trembling. "What if I can't keep us afloat?" William wrapped her in his arms. "We'll manage," he whispered. "We'll get through this, just like we always do." But Debbie wasn't ready to give up. She threw herself deeper into her studies, fueled by a fierce determination. What William didn't know was that her late nights weren't just about coursework. She had been secretly working on an advanced IT project that could secure her a prestigious fellowship. One night as William slept, Debbie stared at her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She bit her lip, glancing at the clock. Only a few more hours until the submission deadline. "This has to work," she whispered to herself, her resolve unshakable. Despite the mounting pressure, Debbie felt a glimmer of hope. If she succeeded, she wouldn't just prove herself to William's family, she'd prove it to herself. The church was a vision of simple elegance, adorned with white lilies and twinkling lights. Debbie adjusted her veil nervously, her heart pounding as Lisa whispered words of encouragement. Outside, guests murmured, and the absence of the gardeners cast a shadow over the joyous occasion. As Debbie walked down the aisle, she caught William's eyes. His smile was steadfast, yet there was a flicker of pain behind it. They exchanged vows, their voices steady but charged with emotion. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, applause erupted, though Debbie noticed the hesitant claps from a few of William's friends. At the reception, Debbie took a deep breath and stepped to the microphone. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "There's something I need to share." The room fell silent as Debbie's hands trembled slightly. She continued, "I haven't been entirely honest. Many of you know me as a room cleaner, but that's only part of my story. I've been pursuing a degree in it, and recently I secured a prestigious fellowship for my research." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Debbie looked at William, whose expression shifted from shock to pride. "Debbie," he said, stepping forward, "you've been doing all this in secret? Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to surprise you," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "To show you and everyone else that I'm more than what they assumed." William embraced her, his voice thick with emotion. "You're incredible," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've always known that." Patricia, standing near the back, raised her glass. "To Debbie for proving that determination and talent always shine through," she declared, her voice cutting through the lingering tension. The room erupted into applause, but Debbie's eyes remained locked on William. "I love you," she whispered as they swayed during their first dance, "and I'll never stop proving to you that we're stronger together." As the night wore on, they basked in the warmth of their friends and newfound supporters. The gardener's absence no longer mattered. Together, Debbie and William have rewritten their narrative, a story of resilience, love, and triumph over prejudice. And as they looked to the future, they knew it would be theirs to shape hand in hand.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.